Icy dread slowly crept through Masai's veins as he glanced all around himself. His little fingers shook slightly, and Masai kept opening and closing his hands to form fists. He breathed in, and the air he collected in his lungs resonated with tingling tension. Masai opened his mouth to yell out, but the words died on his tongue. An eerie silence lingered on the banks of the Va River, with only the sounds of the constant flowing water and the thunderous boom of his own heartbeat to offset the unease and absence of all other noise. Masai scanned the shoreline with his eyes and then peered into the middle of the Va. Tears welled in his eyes, which made his search more difficult. The boat wasn't in sight, nor were his older brothers or their lanky friend. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, and the last traces of daylight left wondrous oranges and purples covering the furthest edge of the sky. A single star glimmered far above him, and more celestial bodies would soon appear. The dread within Masai twisted malevolently, for when the stars came in full force, so would extreme danger. Young Masai stood on the edge of a necropolis, a city of the dead, on the western bank of the Va River. This was no place for a living person, much less a child. Masai sniffled, and he rubbed his eyes with his sleeve. He had to be brave. He just had to. In order for him to see her again, Masai had to endure the perils of the necropolis. It's not like he could retreat, even if he wanted to. The Va River flowed calmly and smoothly, but Masai knew better. The great god Sotor gave the mighty river the strength of 10 men, and such force could easily drag under a small child. If the power of the river's pull didn't end his life, then the crocodiles who thrived within the river surely would. No, Masai had no way back to the city on the eastern bank. Twinkling lights from the city sparkled faintly. While Ijikos wasn't that far away, it might as well have been as distant as Memphar, the capital city. Masai licked his lips and turned his attention to the numerous stone buildings that made up the necropolis. Dark whispers and memories slithered into his mind, stemming from the numerous tales of torment that his older brothers told him in the quiet moments of the night. Hickel and Jyoti relished in going into gruesome details about fools who tried to trespass in the necropolis at night. Violent images danced in Masai's mind's eye. Under normal circumstances, Masai would never dream of throwing his life away. But these were not normal circumstances. Masai had to show the lesser goddess, Anakanti, his courage and his commitment to prove his worth. Most of the buildings within sight were small 1- or 2-story structures made from mud-brown colored clay bricks. The doors were sealed shut, with black flowing script outlining the doorways. Small avenues wound between the buildings, just like the streets of Ijikos. Masai took in a deep breath and remembered his brother Jyoti's words.
When the last bits of light fades from the sky completely, the tomb guardians will awaken. Run and hide, and if you survive until morning, you will get to see her again.
His brothers didn't have to tell him what would happen should he be discovered by the tomb guardians. A single obelisk stood near the edge of the necropolis, and it was gigantic in dimension. The tip of the object must have been 400 or 500 feet high, and the base was as large as Masai's dining room. Deep etchings had been carved along the sides of the obelisk. Though he could not read the script, Masai knew what it meant. Trespassers would be killed. Slowly, Masai moved along the avenues between the mastabas and tombs. The constant rhythm of the river died away, leaving only the soft patter of his footsteps in the sand. it got harder to breathe, and Masai's mouth dried up as soon as he passed the first couple of tombs. Many of the buildings closest to the river were worn down by time and sand, yet they remained as sealed and resilient as ever. The exteriors of the tombs were dull and unadorned, but the insides were rumored to be glorious and beautiful. The only people who ever got to see the insides of the tombs, however, were the tomb builders, the tomb inspectors, and the clerics of Anaconti. Not even Masai would see the inside of his own tomb, whenever the day came. He sniffled again. Would his end come tonight, or would he be found worthy? The air chilled more quickly, and Masai rubbed his arms in a vain attempt to keep his heat. His eyes darted all around, falling on each and every sealed entranceway. Where was he supposed to hide? There was literally nowhere he could tuck into without someone or something passing by and being able to see him. His foot hit a loose stone, and he nearly tumbled to the sand. A savage howl pierced the night, and its vibration echoed between the buildings. Masai stood up. His eyes went wide, and he gazed down each of the avenues ahead and behind him.
That's not funny, you guys.
Masai placed his back against one of the tomb walls, and he pressed as flat as he could.
I'm going to tell Father when he gets home. You had better stop messing with me.
Another, more ominous howl, rippling with primal power, danced on the air. Masai's insides lurched several times, and then warm urine ran down his leg. A third howl resonated with vibrato, and it sounded much closer than the first two. Masai took rapid breaths, and his head swam. He started to move away from the direction of the howls, but then another savage, inhuman call rippled from somewhere behind him. Masai crouched down a little, and then he ran up to the closest sealed entryway. He placed himself against the door, tucked himself into a small ball, held his head in his hands, and then he squeezed his eyes shut.
Mama, I'm scared. Jyoti and Hickle said if I was brave, you'd come out. Where are you? I'm here, Mama. Please come out.
A thunderous bark made him jump, and he sobbed into his hands. Wetness coated his cheeks, but he didn't care. No matter how much courage Masai tried to draw within himself, absolute terror plagued him. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to go, and soon the tomb guardians would find him. A sudden thought flickered in his mind. If he were caught trespassing? No. When he was caught trespassing? Would the clerics of Anaconti even prepare his body? Or would he be denied the trip to R? The mere thought of never seeing her again, being held by her, or even hearing her voice infused the weeping. Masai did his best to stifle his whimpers, but he was just a little boy. His constant cries created little sounds that bounced between the walls of the tombs. The sand crunched near him. Masai squeezed his eyes tighter, and he openly bawled now. He had failed, and thus he was unworthy. Heavy footsteps moved closer to him, and a strange odor filled his nostrils. The fragrance was made up of a combination of ash, incense, and another unknown but pungent scent. A large, wet nose poked his shoulder, followed by several loud and long sniffs. Masai's body tightened, and he packed himself into a smaller bundle, as if it would make him invisible to whatever the nightmare-induced creature was. Other large footsteps drifted over to where Masai lay, and a deep chorus of growls wrapped around him.
Mama, I'm so scared. Please be with me. Please make it not hurt so bad.
A sudden snapping noise popped out, and Masai let out another panicked cry. The growls stopped instantly. A new scent coaxed Masai's nose. It was still ashy and incense-like, but there was a slight, sweet perfume added to the abundance of fragrance. A soft female voice, rippling through him like magic water, beckoned.
Little boy, what are you doing there? Why are you crying?
Slowly, Masai opened his eyes. His heart lurched. 4 large jackals stood over him, staring at him with ominous eyes. The jackals were the size of horses, with sharp, pointed ears and obsidian black fur coats. They didn't have whites of the eyes, but instead slightly lighter shades of onyx black eyes. They had amber irises, though, which seemed to enhance their majesty and frightening nature. The 3 jackals furthest away from him glared at Masai with utter contempt. But the jackal closest to him was different. The closest jackal's expression was softer and sparkled with a kinder glimmer. Masai only gave the jackals another moment's notice. But then he focused on the woman who stood amidst them. The woman was tall, curvy, and she had golden honey-colored skin. She wore a sleeveless black dress that went to her ankles, and a pair of sandals. The woman carried a golden staff with a headpiece in the shape of an ankh. She had long raven hair that went to her shoulders. Masai peered up at her and descended into her honey-colored eyes. Those eyes swallowed him, and he would have happily drowned in them. His soul quaked within him, and while he still shivered at her feet, a small degree of warmth emerged within his chest.
Who are you?
The real question is, who are you?
The woman crouched down a little closer to him, and she frowned slightly.
Why would a little boy be all alone at night in the middle of a necropolis?
Her eyes narrowed, and a sudden hardness flickered within them.
Are you here to rob the tombs?
Masai wiped his face against his sleeve, and he took a deep breath.
I'm not a thief. I promise. My brothers told me that if I was brave and virtuous and came to a city of the dead at night, I would get to see my mother. Please don't let them eat me.
In an instant, the hardness fell away, and her eyes sparkled. Her brow furrowed, and she winced.
Is your mother buried here?
Masai sniffled as he nodded. Once more, he wiped his face and then stared deeper into her gorgeous and terrifying eyes. The woman's face was elegant, and while she didn't smile at him, she didn't frown anymore either. Focusing on the woman brushed back the dread that still lingered within him. The tomb guardians still lorded over Masai, and 3 of the jackals still beamed offended gazes. It made sense, since he was a trespasser. The woman turned her attention to the jackals, and she spoke to them in a strange but enchanting language. Masai's body shrank a little in the presence of such speech. All at once, the jackals turned their backs to Masai, and then they sprinted off down the different avenues. Once they were gone, the woman reached down and offered a hand to Masai. She smiled, and Masai's soul caught flame. His body became intensely warm, and any sliver of fear he once had faded into a near-forgotten memory.
You don't have to be afraid of them anymore. They've gone to scout out the rest of the city.
Masai took her hand. As soon as their skin touched, a swirling tendril of energy filtered into him, and his eyes opened a little wider. His heart thudded harder, but not out of fear. Masai's nerve endings expanded within him, and the blood rushed to his head a little.
Thank you for saving me. I thought they were going to kill me.
They were going to kill you. They are the tomb guardians who protect these sacred resting places from those who would steal from the dead. What were you thinking coming here at night all alone? How did you even get across the river? You're just a child.
My brothers took me over here on their friend's boat. They told me that if I was brave and virtuous, the goddess Anaconti would reward me by letting me talk to my mother. I miss her so much, and so does Iana.
Who is Iana?
She's my little sister. My mom died 4 years ago from an illness, and my sister and I miss her so much. Anyway, my brothers told me that I have to wait until dawn before I can talk to my mother again.
The woman placed a hand on his shoulder, then gently caressed Masai's face with her other hand.
Oh, sweet child. That's not the way it works. Even though I'm sure she wants to see you, you won't be able to talk to her. She's an R. She's passed on.
Masai stared up into those Dia-blessed eyes. The longer he did, the more he knew that she spoke the truth. A great and terrible discontent swept up in him, and Masai collapsed onto his knees. Once more, tears flowed out from his eyes like rainwater. His words dribbled out through gasps and whimpers.
I want to see her. My brothers are so mean all the time, and Father is never home. I just want to be loved again.
The woman's arms wrapped around his little body, and a blanket of warmth encompassed him. Masai's skin tingled, although it wasn't unpleasant at all. It almost felt as if her whole body vibrated, and his soul tried to match its frequency. Masai placed his head on her bosom, and he cried harder. The woman merely rocked Masai back and forth, and her long fingers raked through his thick hair. Masai hugged her back, and he emptied his sorrow into her eager and waiting embrace.
Let it out, child. It is not as bad as it seems. I know it hurts now, but once you weep out your anguish, you will feel better. Believe me, I know that lesson all too well.
The woman's perfume made Masai's head swim. The aroma was so familiar, but he couldn't name it off the top of his head. It was such a striking scent, and then it registered within his mind. Masai looked up at the woman.
You smell like funeral incense. Are you a cleric of Anaconti?
The woman locked eyes with him.
Yes, I'm of the Anaconti order.
I thought so. Those jackals listen to you, and they're the sacred animal of Anaconti.
Masai paused for a second and averted his eyes. His stomach swelled and shuddered.
Am I going to get in trouble?
The woman smiled down at him.
You are not here to steal from the dead, so you will not get in trouble with me. I am sure your father is worried about you, though.
My father's away with his troops. He's a battalion captain, and he was called up for Princess Maya's Baja trial. He's mad at me at the moment. I don't think he would care if I turned up dead or never came back.
Why is your father mad at you? Surely he loves you. Is your father so terrible of a man that he would neglect his child?
The cleric of Anaconti stood up and gently gripped Masai's hand. The constant warmth flowed into him, and Masai allowed himself to be pulled up to a stand. She led him down the avenues with confident strides. Darkness had enveloped the necropolis, and the only real luminescence came from the moon that shimmered overhead. Masai couldn't see, but the cleric had no trouble.
He's mad at me because I told him I didn't want to be a soldier. He got even madder when I told him I wanted to join the temples. My mother was of the temples, and I want to be like her.
The air had chilled even more, and yet Masai didn't shiver. While he understood and felt the barest echoes of the cold night, his body resonated with an almost magical kind of heat.
Why did he get mad? Does he hate the temples?
He blames the Temple of Sara for not saving my mother.
Urgency dripped from his lips, and Masai peered up at the cleric with anticipation. Each of his answers had been provided with quick and concise care. Whenever the cleric peeked down at him or smiled, Masai visually wiggled a little.
I think he's disappointed I'm not more like my half-brothers.
You mean the ones who tricked you?
Yeah. They don't like me because I have a different mother. And they say I'm a little sissy. I'm not a sissy, I just don't like the stuff they like. They already started their military training and they pick on me all the time.
When Masai and the cleric emerged from the necropolis, Masai shifted his gaze to the twinkling universe above them. 1 billion stars hung about, and once more, Masai's body shrank a little. Still, being near this cleric eased some of that smallness. The cleric spared the universe a single glance. Masai looked across the Va to the distant city of Ijakos. The lights from the city paled in comparison to Dia's wondrous bounty above.
It is unfortunate that your siblings do not appreciate you more. I know that feeling all too well.
She pointed ahead along the shore.
I have a small hut where we can wait until morning. I will contact some clerics after sunrise and they will come to take you home.
The cleric led him along the shore to a small one-story hut near the base of the obelisk. It was about 15 feet by 20 feet and had a worn-looking but welcoming door in front. A small circular window revealed light and warmth inside. The smell of cooked meat also greeted him, and Masai's mouth became flooded with hunger and anticipation. His stomach growled loudly. Had the hut been there all along? Surely he hadn't missed it, but then again, there it was.
Have you eaten yet? There is food inside.
Masai's stomach lurched within him, and it roared out like a lioness. He stopped, though, and he gazed up at her.
Thank you for being so nice to me, but may I please ask you a question?
The cleric smiled.
Of course you may.
Why are you being so nice to me? My brothers told me clerics of Anaconti were usually mean.
Did they now?
The cleric crouched down so that her eyes were level with his.
Based on what I have heard about them, they sound like liars and buffoons. Am I right?
Masai grinned at her.
Yeah, they are kind of stupid.
Let me tell you about the clerics of Anaconti. They are the best clerics in all of Enonoch. Do you know why?
Masai shook his head.
They are the best clerics because everyone encounters death at some point. No one escapes it, not even pharaohs. Clerics of Anaconti prepare the dead so they can go on their sacred journeys to Ar. Everything you do in this life prepares you for that journey. Helping people transition from one life to the next is the most sacred duty anyone can do for another.
Wow. I had no idea they were that important. How come more people don't respect them?
The cleric's face grew a little sterner.
I wish more people had your insight, little one. There are people within my order who fight to make things more accommodating for my people.
Masai nodded.
That's good. People should be nicer to the Anaconti clerics. So, are the Anaconti clerics nice?
The cleric opened the door to the hut and said,
Yes, most Anaconti clerics are nice if you give them a chance. You know, I see a lot of myself in you. Come, let us fill our bellies and then I will sing you to sleep.
Masai entered the hut. Large, lavish pillows sat along the walls of the floor, and a roaring fireplace stood against the far wall. A large chunk of what smelled like boar meat roasted above the fireplace. The cleric closed the door behind them, led Masai over to one of the pillows, and then moved toward the roasting meat. Masai couldn't help but smile.